Finance correspondent Phil Lasker explains the dilemma faced by policymakers here as they grapple with the problem of boosting the economy but not the property market. And a warning, this story does contain some strong language.
Being shipwrecked on a deserted island comes to mind when bank analyst Brian Johnson explains an important global dynamic.
And there's one coconut in the middle, and for whatever reason we've all agreed that our currency will be a shell, and we've all got one shell each.
So the maximum anyone can pay for the coconut is one shell, but suddenly more shells are washed ashore. So the castaways can pay more for the coconut, but
Still a fucking coconut.
It's a very simple description of how quantitative easing or printing money pushes up asset prices. Just one of the many problems washing up on our shores, leaving the Reserve Bank with its biggest headache in decades.
For most of the last 20-odd years I've been following the markets, there really haven't been the multitude of cross-currents affecting the economy.
Cross-currents like the approaching hike in US interest rates, while rates are zero in other parts of the world. Not to mention the overvalued Australian dollar and rapidly rising big city property prices.
So I think the RBA is does have some very, what we call in economics conflicts in their policy objectives. There's you obviously don't want to see a booming property market and the bank's financial fragility getting out of whack. You don't want to see the Australian dollar staying higher than what it really should be.
Lower interest rates have resulted in the unwanted side effect of higher property prices.
But it hasn't been insurmountable for the Reserve Bank to lower rates a little bit further because they think that's what the broader economy needs, even though it's definitely an issue for the housing market.
But the risk is that an overheated property market can cause problems for the broader economy.
Housing prices can come down just as quickly as they go up. And if that happens, of course, there are feedback effects into the broad economy as households start to pull back on their spending, try to pay down debt, banks call in loans, get much more selective about who they lend to for what purposes. So you can have a downward spiral.
So, in their efforts to avoid triggering a damaging plunge in property prices, while interest rates are coming down to get the broader economy moving, the Reserve Bank and prudential regulator APRA are imposing informal restrictions on riskier bank lending for property. But the OECD sees these so-called macro-prudential strategies as an inadequate substitute for good policy making, strategies that were used in the 50s, 60s and 70s.
Those things really didn't work back then, so they're probably not going to work now, but in the short term they might have some small benefits.
Every time I think about it, it reminds me a little bit of a Monty Python scene, The Life of Brian, where someone's being a very naughty boy. That's how it feels if you just read the newspapers, but I would flag to you, it seems to me there is a little bit more going on than we're actually being made publicly aware of.
But Reserve Bank Governor Glenn Stevens needs help. Interest rates are working most effectively on property prices where they're not needed and losing their kick elsewhere.
Rates are low, the economy's growing, it's just not growing very quickly. There's not much that monetary policy can do to further stimulate it, given the forces that are holding growth back at the moment.
So putting a lid on property prices should fall to Canberra and next month's budget.
Generally, you would say that fiscal policy could have a role to play in the current policy framework.
But the government's approach to this budget suggests the ball will remain firmly in the Reserve Bank Governor's court, with much more complex problems than our shipwrecked friends.